Greetings Iron Sharks and Fencers. So I was asked to make a couple videos, the first being striking with intent and not striking at the sword. First we'll look at the sources. The Zettel tackles this issue very early. Whoever goes after cuts, they permit their art little joy. Strike close whatever you will, no changer will come into your shield. Never strike to the sword, always wait for the openings. So if we are just simply waiting for them to strike so we can parry, or striking into their sword, then we will have very little joy and success. But instead strike at whatever you can reach, whether head, body or hands, and they will be unable to change through and have to parry our cut. We're even given the advice, and never strike to the sword, but just work like he would not have a weapon, or if you don't see it. So what does this look like in practice? Well, once we're fencing, you'll see people actually cut at the sword thinking that they are targeting the body. These cuts that you see right now may look okay, but all of these cuts against a skilled fencer would actually cause an immediate hit on oneself, because they're actually not targeting the body, but the sword at front of it. The cuts would pass by beside the opponent.
So, notice how the sword wasn't there?
People do this at times with thrusts as well, where they always expect it to be parried, so they stop making it real and aim it to the side instead of fighting for the center line. And people's first thwart cuts often have the same issue, where they expect it to fail, so it's always a feint, and they stop being able to make a real first thwart. When you catch people cutting for the sword, then you can simply dodge their sword in any way and strike them after, changing through, pulling, striking around, running off. And if their first attack ends up always being a feint, then just start striking into it. Test people's first thwarts and thrusts, make them have to improve by calling their bluff and just hitting into it and dealing with their next attack. So ensuring that we follow the sources and actually striking the body so they have to react to it is important. How do we start adding that into our drilling if we can't see the difference yet, or to help others see it? The first is multiple choice drills, with the first option being that the initial strike hits. A very basic drill early on could be a cut 1 and 2. The trainer pulls the sword back to their shoulder and the student cuts at the head, the coach parries and the student makes a cut 2 to the other side. Throughout the drill, the trainer will simply not parry and the cut 1 should land. This type of multiple choice can be added to every drill with an initiating cut. Another would be cut, thrust, run off, and again add the initial multiple choice of doing nothing and the first hit lands, and the multiple choice can be added anywhere. A different test can be added to flow drills though. If we were doing parry, parry, cut, cut, if I think cuts aren't aiming at me, then I simply don't move my sword to parry and see what happens. If they hit me, good. If they miss, then they know they were chasing the blade. And this check can be added to all types of parrying drills.
So if I parry someone who's cutting at my head, I should be looking at him with the swords on the outside. I should be able to clearly see his head and the swords are stuck out here. But I can tell if someone is not cutting at my head, because if he cuts over to the other side, I'm looking at him and the swords are on the opposite side. This means I'm not parrying the sword is going way over there. So in reality I should just be leaving that sword because it is no danger to me. And that's one of the ways to tell. Same thing for the other side. If you make a cut 2 at my head, I'm looking at him, the swords are on the outside. If he cuts over at the camera, then now I'm looking at him from the other side of the sword, and I can tell that his cut should not be aimed at me, and so I can leave the sword and strike somewhere else. So in parrying drills, ox is one of the culprits that lead to people not striking at the body. So if you cut at me and then I run off and I cut at him, and if he cuts at me again, this is one of the times when people often don't actually target the head. Here he's targeting my head, my hands are in danger, that's one of the good signs. If I run off and I cut at him, I hit his hands. That's one of the ways that I know that the head would have been in the trajectory of my cut, is that I'm really aiming for his hands. We cycle through the drill again. And then he drops his sword. We sometimes end up aiming to the side to help the person out, but we need to always aim at the body, and that teaches them how to parry realistically. Once more, I make all my cuts. Nice. And notice how it hit him in the thumb a couple times. That's how he knew that he needed to get his hands a little bit further to the side to actually cover himself. And so that's how we help our training partners improve, by making sure that we target the body. Well, the other things we need to make sure that we do is, we do need to cut with good structure. If I'm cutting just at the sword, he's behind the sword, so I need to be cutting with enough structure that I actually get through him. And so if I cut and he blocks, I need to cut with actually straight arms, and notice how that can push him off balance and strike through. And so making sure that we realize that our target is behind the sword, not just to the sword. I'm not striking lightly, and so I'm not just trying to touch his sword with my strikes. I'm trying to strike through his sword, and then I can start breaking through. And it makes people start having to make real parries and real strong parries, because I'm not just touching to the sword, I'm trying to strike past it.
So have the concept that any motion in distance that doesn't immediately threaten your opponent is an invitation for them to hit. And you can start off with the rule to enforce this, that every initiating motion should be an attempt to hit them. But as you progress, you will start to break that rule in order to gain advantage and take control at different ranges, such as crooked cuts, barring, beating, feinting, and taking the center line. We're actually given the advice that if we are not hitting them, then we should get our point within 30 to 40 centimeters from their body. This lets us cut to the center line and be close enough that they have to react, and they can't ignore our blade by changing through or pulling, and we're close enough to get the hit with the next tempo. Thanks for watching, keep studying, keep practicing.